Into strategy Pacific. I was going to say and the Pacific, but it's really in the Pacific is where this war is happening. We are currently setting up turn 6, and I have now slowed down a little bit to give everybody a chance to catch up. I've also figured out that in some ways people would rather talk about the setup and the strategy because they're playing the game. Watching my game resolve, I guess, is exciting to some extent, and we will always be doing that on Sundays when we stream. But during the week, I'm going to try to go through what I'm thinking, the different strategies, go to different locations maybe each week and talk about how we're setting those up and preparing for right now the Japanese attacks, and then eventually how we are going to start our counter attacks. But that's still a little ways in the future. Right now we're on the defense, of course. This time and this week, I'm setting up the continental United States because I feel like I was a little lax, which is unlike me, but I wanted to stay on the schedule. And so I had, maybe not paid as much attention to the continental US as I normally would. That's okay. A turn or two of a cargo ship not making it to Australia or otherwise is not going to be the end of your game. It's honestly not a huge deal. It just kind of bugs the back of my brain. I start hearing the whispers, go set that up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue here today in the continental US. We'll be looking at Los Angeles. I'm not sure if we'll make it to San Francisco and San Diego. Maybe. I mean, we may make it to San Diego, probably not San Francisco. But then I think Wednesday, Thursday, I'll be looking at Pearl Harbor. Now, at Pearl Harbor, and we can let's fly out to Pearl Harbor. We have been looking for that main Japanese task force. We have not spotted them. They are out here somewhere, potentially moving, straight west back to the Japanese home islands. Usually they will peel out of here, and sometimes they'll stop over at Midway. Sometimes they'll come help at Wake if they think that's necessary, and it might be here because they haven't made much headway on Wake Island, even though we don't have much there. But then eventually, they're heading back to the Japanese home islands to rearm, refuel, get ready for where they're going next, which is always very interesting because if they come down to Sumatra, Java, Borneo, heck, I've even seen them come down near Nomaya, down to Suva Way. That's always a little disconcerting because we don't have a whole lot of ways of stopping them. And so, we'll wait and see what happens there. But the point of this is that we have not set up Pearl Harbor, really. We've got 116 ships in port. They've all just been sitting there waiting for the Japanese to clear. We don't want to put them in danger for any reason. There's no hurry to get a lot of this stuff out. If we look at what's here, we have our ACMs here. These are our mine tenders. They will be taking care of our mines that we will have there at Pearl Harbor. Those are specialized ships that do that. But you see an AO up here, which has got a nice capacity for fuel that we could be carrying back and forth from. It could come out of Vancouver, it could come out of Anchorage, it could come out of San Francisco or LA. Because these oilers like this, we will early on be using as transporting fuel with them early on, and later on then they will go with our carrier task forces as we start to take back Japanese islands. But anyway, I'll kind of just gloss over what we're going to be doing here later in the week. We've got all of these destroyers. Now these are more mine layer destroyers here. You see how many of them we have. We'll be sending those down to our important places like Nomaya, down to Pago Pago, places like that, laying mines. We have even more minesweeper destroyers, and then we have regular destroyers. We also have more destroyers showing up. We have a lot of capital ships. So, you see all of these destroyers now. We will be setting all of that up. We'll also be looking all over the aircraft again. Right now, we had to kind of scramble a bunch of things up in CAP. just in case the Japanese wanted to make a return engagement here to Pearl Harbor. It does not seem that they do. And so we'll start looking at those. Some of those we may shift out of Pearl Harbor, just kind of depending on this, what we need and where. But for this time, let's jump over here to our spreadsheet where we left off last time. And where were we last time? Well, we were at Fresno, of all places. Fresno right here. All right, there's not much going on at Fresno. We have transferred, there were bolos here, and we transferred them all, I think all of them. Yeah. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, we had 5 squadrons of bolos sitting in Fresno. These are going to be withdrawn. And we talked about this in the tutorials. We talked about it a little bit in the Let's Play. But there are units on the Allied side that get withdrawn off the map to keep the game historical, to keep the game balanced. They have you withdraw these. You actually have to do it. If you do not, you start to suffer penalties. So the game does give you an option to leave some of these things on the board if you think you really need them. But if you do, you start to lose victory points for that. So that's not good. We don't want that, obviously. So we shifted these all the way back to the eastern US, though. A lot of these bolos, let's just go find one. 3664 is one. These guys. All right, and you can see right up here, removed by January 15th, 1942. Okay, how would we do that? Well, we would hit withdraw group. Right now, we are not allowed to do that. It is grayed out. That is because this, we have, it's only one plane here, and it's damaged. Now, why is it damaged? Well, we had to ship it by rail from the West Coast back to the East Coast. That shows as damaged for a couple of days, I believe, and then it'll be serviceable. Once it's serviceable, we could withdraw it. Sometimes you actually pick up political points. If you, did I say victory points earlier? It's actually political points that it costs you. It's almost like buying something out. You're just buying more time for it. But when this thing is active again, this plane, the next one to it, I think is the same idea, although what I just said is not true for this plane. Maybe by next turn we'll be able to withdraw it no matter what. We have to withdraw it by January 15th, 1942. We will be doing that. But in the time that we have here, which is well over, well, I say well over, we're December 13th now, so it's a little over a month. We are training pilots with these squads, and that's really what you want to do with these. We've moved them to the East Coast to get them out of the way, quote unquote, out of the way. We're not going to be able to use them in any kind of missions, really. They don't serve any purpose other than for training pilots. So we're going to send them back to the East Coast. They are going to be training some of our pilots, and that's good. I mean, we need as much training at this point in the game as we can get. We need to get our pilots better. Our pilots are not very good at the start. You can see here the average experience 27. Now this is just one pilot, of course, I believe. Yeah, ready pilot. It's just one pilot. But he might as well build up. You can really only go up from 27. So we have shifted those back. That's all Fresno. We've got them training some ASW. We've got them training, I guess all those guys are training ASW, so that's good. So we'll get some better pilots. Now, for those, I am going to leave them green on my spreadsheet because eventually, before January 15th, we are going to have to, actually click buttons to get them off the board. And so we don't want to forget about that and have a message pop up saying, that we've been charged some points. So we don't want that. Fresno, we're building forts, expanding the airfield. Do you really need to do that? Probably not. But we are, and we also have light industry, manpower, resources. Okay, great. We turn all that red on the spreadsheet. Really no reason to ever look at that again. Eventually, you may want to go around to some of these bases. Let's get back down here to Fresno. You may want to just kind of click around on these and say, hey, does it make sense Fresno, there you are. Does it really make sense to even be, building up the airfield here? You don't have any aircraft there, probably not. It's taken up some supply. You just have such an overabundance of supply. It just, in some respects, doesn't matter in the continental U.S., and you might as well build up several of these in case, on the off chance that you need it for some reason, but ultimately probably not very important, to be honest with you. Um, Bayard says, sometimes it can be worth it to retain some squadrons. For example, the A-24 Banshee dive bomber squadrons can be really useful in and around Port Moresby. True, Bayard. I think Bayard is talking about, when you do expend some points to keep some units around that would be withdrawn. Yeah, that it is always kind of a game time decision, right? Sometimes you're going to have some units that maybe are very useful to you at that point. It really is no different than when you say, hey, I've got these units in Australia. They're not necessarily doing a lot for me on the mainland of Australia. Why don't I buy them out, put it in the 1st Australian Corps, and send them over to Port Moresby? You're making that calculation. Sometimes when we talk about the political points, I think maybe there's a tendency to say, oh gosh, don't spend that, don't spend this. I mean, they're ultimately there to be spent, and they're there to be spent for things that you find important or places that you think need maybe some buffing up or some help or some units, as Bayard says here. Those units could be very helpful in Port Moresby. And so, those points eventually, it's kind of a waste if you end the game with, 1,500 political points. Why? They're there to be spent as a currency. And so every time you make that calculation, just, think, well, I'm kind of making a cost benefit analysis with that. I think maybe sometimes people are very reluctant, especially early in the game, to spend those points, which is sort of almost backwards, because really you should be looking to spend them early when you're at a disadvantage and you need to be moving things around. You need to, be putting out fires at different places of the map. And so just always keep that in mind that, getting to 1944 and having a million political points, just that doesn't do you any good. At that point, assuming things are going the way they should be going, you will be pushing the Japanese back. You do not need to be worrying so much about, oh my gosh, I've got to get a battalion to Port Moresby or it's going to fall, So just kind of big picture stuff to think about there. Back to beautiful Fresno. Now we did have an LCU here, and that LCU, we strat moved to Sacramento, to the state capital. We've got to defend the capital of California. That is this unit. I think it's the 50. No, it was a base force, actually. My bad. It's the 132nd. It's these guys. We can take them out of strategic mode. They are tethered to the West Coast. We can change from Fresno here to Sacramento. And that's that, okay? We can turn them orange. They probably will not be moving the rest of the game. Next, we have Great Falls. There's nothing going on at the airfield and base at Great Falls. That can go to red. But we do have, let's see, okay, we did have the 130th Base Force. We move-moded those. We marched them to Butte, or if you're European, you may say, why did they call a town out there But it is Butte, and we're going to set the objective to Corvallis, okay? So we move this thing to Butte. Here's Butte. Oh, it's still on the way. Okay, so here's Great Falls. It's coming down to Butte. There it is, 130th. Base Force. We have set the objective to Corvallis. So once it gets to Butte, you see why the Cole decided to do this. We're marching it down the road. It gets to Butte. We're going to then railroad it all the way over here to Corvallis so that Corvallis has a base force, because Corvallis right now does have some engineers, but does not have a base force. So we will be doing that. We need to keep that green. All right. Las Vegas, my kind of town. Not really. My wife and I went through Las Vegas on our cross-country journey recently, and it was a ghost town, as you might imagine, during COVID. Now, this is before the second set of lockdowns, so it was kind of in between, the initial wave of COVID. My wife and I have already had COVID, so it was not a big deal. We stopped at different places. So we were coming up to Las Vegas, and I was like, well, should we stop? So she looked on an app, and she's like, well, I don't know, we can get a room for $25. And I said, oh, well, why not? Let's do it, right? Before I get into this more interesting story, I'm going to say, I'm going to answer this question. OCB says, yes, that's right. Bayard answered the question. OCB 84 asked, how many political points do you earn? It's not a one-time thing. You get them each turn, as Bayard said. It's based on the scenario. I'm trying to think. I think as the Allies, what do we get, 50 or 30 in the grand scenario? I just can't remember if it's 50 or 30 per day, but you get those per day. And so, if you don't spend them for 2 or 3 days, generally you're going to have enough to maybe buy a unit out. Not a big infantry unit. The big infantry units cost between like 200 or 300, so that may take as much as a week to build up that many political points to get a nice infantry regiment, let's say, out. Generally the plane squadrons are going to cost you around 50, maybe 60. That if you're getting them out of their current command. Now, if you're just transferring them within command, so there's two different transfers. You can transfer the headquarters of something within its command, meaning kind of within its theater. All right, so take like Australia, has like an Eastern Command and a Western. I'm just kind of making this up, but this is true. It has an Eastern Command and a Western Command. Let's say you have something in the Eastern Command, but you're getting attacked at Perth and you wanted to get the command bonuses. You may buy that infantry unit out and make it part of the Western Command, but it's within the Grand Australian Command, so you pay less for that. I think it's like 20 or 30% of what it would be if you try to buy it completely out of its command. And so when you look at the command structure, you'll have like Southwest Pacific, and then you'll have the groups under Southwest Pacific that will attach it to that grand overall theater command, but then you have the individual groups underneath. You're going to pay the full price for that. But if it's already part of the Southwest Pacific, but let's say it's I don't know, again, I'm making up something, but let's say it's part of the Fourth Army or something, or the 2 Corps, let's say. If it's part of the 2 Corps, but you want it to go to the 1 Corps, but that's all part of Southwest Pacific, you're going to pay like 20 or 30% of what the total cost would be to get it completely out of its theater command. So just keep all that in mind. Watching myself over here to the left so I can see the chat, and I'm like, wow, I'm using a lot of hand motions there. So anyway, hopefully that made sense. So we were coming into Las Vegas, and yeah, it was 25. Oh, I froze, damn it. Hold on. Oh, sorry guys. Evidently had a freeze there for a minute, or at least I saw one. And so yeah, it was $25 a night, but man, you talk about a ghost town. There was just no one in Las Vegas, no one at all. The streets were barren, as you might imagine. It was actually quite sad when you think about all of the people that town supports, from dealers to waitresses to people behind the bar or people clean the rooms. I mean, obviously that's a massive economy. It's very sad. There is Las Vegas on the map. Let's get back to the task at hand, and let's see what is happening in Vegas. No action at the airfield and no action with its resources. Now, what's interesting is that Las Vegas really, so we're going to turn those both red. Las Vegas really became a real town during World War II because all of the American troops coming, to the Pacific Theater, or at least to the West Coast, had to pass through Las Vegas. And at some point, that little cow town figured out there were so many GIs coming to Los Angeles, especially, but also San Francisco, but really LA. There were so many GIs coming there and stopping at the base out there that a whole industry of prostitution, gambling, liquor, you name it, happened out there in the desert, and that's really what got Las Vegas going, was the Pacific War in World War II. But for this game, there is nothing going on in Las Vegas. Now we're finally into LA, Los Angeles, the City of Angels, although if you ever visit, you would wonder why they named it that. Uh, I would assume back in the day when it was named, it was absolutely gorgeous when the Spanish got there, because it is in so many beautiful parts of LA, but also so many strange and now ugly parts of LA as well. All right, so we had the Kingfishers out here. So I'm looking at the first air group in Los Angeles, and we only have two out here. And this was the 2834, which is these guys, the Kingfishers. We're training them to do some naval search. We also brought in new aircraft and new pilots. As you can see, we've got a lot of Kingfishers here in the pool. We are limited in this squadron to 18, and we pushed it all the way to the limit, and we also went and got some pilots to train up on these Kingfishers with naval search. So they are doing that. Now, you may say, well, that's weird. LA only has two squadrons. We keep a lot of them back here at March Field, and you'll be seeing more and more of them get back here. I actually, when I'm playing the game and not necessarily playing on Cole's spreadsheet as directly as I am this time, will really use March Field and bring all of my air assets that I eventually want to move out down here to March Field. You've got the 4th USAAF here. The 4th is landlocked. I say landlocked. It is a West Coast restricted unit. That will not get out of here, this air headquarters, but it does provide a lot of air support. How much? Let's see, 50 aviation support for these training planes, as does the base force here. We've got another 90 of aviation support. So there you're talking about 140 planes, and you see here, my math was almost right, 139 planes can be supported here now. Hey, it's Stanley. What's up, Stanley? Back in 1973, you visited Glendale, huh? Okay, we were just through Glendale not long ago. 1973, I have a feeling LA was a happening town. It still is. There's always something going on in LA. The problem is the town stretches 100 miles across. It's, unlike Chicago, where I'm from, Chicago, they built up, and so there's a real sense of the city. There's a downtown, and then there's all kind of the wheel spokes that go out from downtown. In LA, they claim they have a downtown, but it's like 6 buildings that are over 4 stories tall, and then it's just spread out. As far as basically San Diego and LA are growing together through Orange County, and I think it's just going to be like one big megapolis at some point. It'll kind of look like, if you're a Star Wars fan, Coruscant down there, an all city area that stretches all the way from the Mexico border, up to LA. Now, where I am, I'm further up north, a little closer to Santa Barbara. It gets a lot less urban up this way. There's some, sleepy beach towns. If you ever get a chance, take the drive north out of LA up to Santa Barbara. It doesn't get prettier than that. Okay, so we've got these, we've got, what did I say, 39 aviation support out here. Right now, I guess I should have looked at that. We've got 34 planes out here, but this is March Field. It's right behind LA. It's the hex, what is that? North and east, one hex from LA. So you'll have a lot of your air units there. Oh, Stanley's saying, yeah, he came back Mission Viejo in the south, close to Disneyland down in Anaheim. Yeah, I've been down there. I'm a big Cubs fan. I'm a big, American baseball fan, and the Cubs were playing down there, and went down and watched them. And Disneyland, the old Disneyland, the original one that's out here in LA, I actually prefer it to Disney World in Florida, which is 5 parks and all the crap they got going on there. The one at down in Anaheim's a lot more manageable. You can spend a day or two and kind of hit everything down there. It's a lot of fun, whether you're a Disney fan or not. There's it's people watching, right? Um, okay, I've gone on a few left turns here today. Let's get back to LA. These Kingfishers, okay, we got them doing what we need to do. We're not going to be able to buy these out. I'm just going to turn them orange. They are, well, let's get back to LA. This is fourth. I just want to make absolutely sure. No, it's not. I'm glad I came back and looked. It's Fleet Air West. We could buy them out. Well, might we? I don't know. Um, it's a lot of planes. It's 18 planes. I'm going to keep that green and come back and look at it from time to time. Let's see. Yeah, this is what I was talking about before. 36 points to change outside of command, 9 points within command. And again, this is what I was talking about. As long as you're transferring within the West Coast here, that's what it means by command. It would only be 9 points. So, for instance, the 11th US AAF is generally up in Alaska. If you wanted these to go up to Alaska, which might be a good use for them, it's more useful than down here by LA, although they don't really have that great of a range. It's only a 6. So, in Alaska, they might not be as useful. But if you wanted to transfer them to the 11th, that would cost you 9 points. However, if you go down here to the Pacific Fleet, if we wanted to put them in the U.S. Navy Forward Air Central Pacific, which is located in Hawaii, we wanted to switch that to the command, it would be 36 points, okay? And so as you see here, we have 234, so we have built up quite a bit, and I have spent quite a bit. I always like to leave 50 or 100 in the kitty just to make sure, you just might get in a situation. Take Singapore, for instance. In Singapore, you do have those British units that you're trying to get out. You may have a chance to get an Australian unit out. By leaving 50 or 100, you at least kind of keep those options open. But of course, if you need to spin them, spin them. Don't worry about going down to 0. If you absolutely think like you're going to lose Port Moresby, if you don't get another unit up there, by all means spin them. Okay. Oh, don't worry about it, Stanley. I'm the one that got sidetracked. I appreciate the stories. I'm giving you a tour guide of the West Coast here. LA, we've got the build forts, expand port. So we're actually expanding the port here at LA. It's an 8, expanding towards a 9. Now you see expanding at 1%. It is going to take a very long time to take this port up to a 9. But it's worth it, and we've got plenty of supply to do it. Now underneath there you see all of the aircraft assembly at LA. So at LA, we are assembling the A-20 Havoc, the A-26B Invader, the B-25C Mitchell, the B-25H Mitchell, all of the different flavors of Lightning, all of the Mustangs, or pretty much all of them, the PV-1 Ventura, and the Dauntless. Those are all being put together in LA. Then we also have heavy industry, light industry, manpower, oil, refinery, repair, and resources. So a lot happening here in LA. Those all go red. There's nothing we can do with those or that we would even want to do with those. Speaking of which, we might as well kind of look a little closer here at LA. 279,000 in fuel already. That's just going to keep growing and growing. We'll try to get as many ships in here as we can to get it out, but you know, you just get inundated with fuel here. John Paul Getty and his people are just filling up the pipelines. That is also getting turned into supply because we have factories down here. So here's your aircraft assembly, and you can pull that up and look at all of them. We've got our repair shipyard, which is a size 90. Now the one at San Francisco, I think, is bigger. I think it's like a 140. Just keep that in mind if you're bringing something back to the West Coast to get repaired. Light industry, okay, we've got a lot of that, 1280. Refinery, great, 2500. I do believe that's the largest refinery in the game. We talked about this when it came to Palembang. Palembang's like 1020, so this is over 2 times as big refining oil. You've got the big heavy industry here, 860, oil 2000, you know, this just goes on and on. Resources 200, manpower, that's all just being cranked out in fuel and supply. That's great. Okay, so now we've got the very first unit here, and this is when I said I was behind. I'm not sure that I have set this up. And Bayard says, yeah, not all factories are producing yet. That is true. That is true. They will come online. So the 113th Base Force. Now, it should have been loaded on something by now, but we have not done that yet. We're going to set the objective to Brisbane. All right. And we have now done that. And we're going to load that on a transport to Nomaya. Now that's kind of an interesting, so we turn it to strat move here for the 113th. We are going to be going out into the Pacific. You can see here it's already attached to Pacific Fleet. That's great. We don't have to spend a dime on that. We do have some transport task forces here waiting. Now we have not labeled this one, so we don't have an exact destination for it, but we have labeled this one, Transport Nomaya. So this 113th could be loaded on here into this transport task force. We have already earmarked Nomaya. Let's see what we have here. So we have 3 cargo ships. All with, you know, pretty decent cargo here. Then we have the Mariposa, which looks like a really nice big transport. Look at that. Wow. The Matson Line class. 4,300 in troop capacity. All right. That looks good. And then let's see. We had one. Come on. Now we had one more here. The Barnett, which is a little smaller. 1,100 and 1,700. Now let's go look at our base force. That is 304, okay. It's mainly all cargo. So it's 2588 in cargo. All right, let's go back to our task force. We do have some bigger cargo ships here. Interesting. All right, so as I go through here, I'm going to make a note, and I say I'm going to do it literally right now, of this base force, what its load cost is. So I'm gonna, I'm just gonna write 113th BF, and it's 304 troop, 304T and 2588C. And I know we have more things that need to go to Nomaya. I also know that we have transports that are sitting here at LA, and we're going to try to figure out the most efficient way to get all of these units that need to go to Nomaya onto transports and cargo ships. We're going to need cargo ships. As you just saw with this base force, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be putting cargo on transports. Now you need a transport for every unit you're going to move, and sometimes that can lead it to be a little inefficient, but let's try to get this as efficient as we can. So we'll come back to that one. I'm going to leave that one just white blank. I haven't given it anything yet. Then we have the 65th Field AA Battalion. Okay, that's probably right there. That's West Coast restricted, but it could be bought out. Okay, we're going to turn that orange. Cole said no action on this. I mean, we do want to have some AA and LA just in case the unthinkable happens. Next, we have the 78th. All right, so here's the 78th. And Cole says release this with 27 political points to the South Pacific headquarters and load on the Transport Task Force to Nomaya. Now, he says weeks away on this. I think we're ready. We have a lot of transports here. We do not, well, let's see. Let's get these sorted so we can see exactly what we have. We have, destroyer, aircraft tender destroyer here. We have two AOs, so the oiler ships that we will be using to move. We're actually probably, they're very slow. Um, and they don't quite have the endurance you want to go all the way to Australia, but they have a huge capacity. But we may just send those to Pearl Harbor, we'll see. We also have a transport destroyer. Now that's interesting, right? It can take 180 in troop capacity. It's something. Um, then we have these APs here. These, the ones that are named after pro tip here, the ones that are named after presidents or queens are fantastic. They're the best of that kind of ship. Um, yeah, Bayard says don't use those AOs willy-nilly. No, totally agree. What I do at the start of the game is I'll have them make generally very simple runs from LA or San Francisco to Pearl Harbor, generally speaking. I do not like to send them all the way to Australia unless I take them all the way south, have them refuel down at Auckland, kind of go Tahiti to Auckland up to Sydney. But there is enough submarine out there activity that it does make it uh, kind of risky because, as Bayard says, they are very precious. You want to hold on, very tightly to those because later on, when you're going to send out attacking task forces, it's very important that you have oilers along. The last thing you need is a carrier dead in the water that you cannot get refueled. They call them oilers, but they're really floating gas stations. And so, be careful with those. So anything named after a president or a queen, so like the Queen Elizabeth, can carry a lot of, they're fast, they're good. Um, yeah, and Bayard said AOs and tankers are the one ship type, right? We have a severe shortage of tankers. He says it's the one ship type you don't get a lot of at the start as the allied player, or even as you go along. Maybe tankers a little bit more, but yeah, the AOs not much. But the tankers, you're very short at the start. You just have to be very careful with them. And so the President Monroe, we would have 1350 troop, 3200 cargo. Okay. So they are very good transport ships. So we do have, what, five in here? And as we go through these LCUs more, we will. Oh, we also have some civilians down here, some civilian transports. So that's great. Yeah, we've got a lot of transport capacity here. If anything, um, which is strange early in the game, is we have more transports here than cargo ships. You don't often see that right off the start because oilers, tankers, transport ships as the allies, a Japanese player would say, oh, don't cry, over what you've got. But really, as the allied player, that's what you have a shortage of at the start. It's not as severe a shortage as what the Japanese end up facing for certain. You get a lot of these things. But right at the start, you're definitely short of transports. So we have actually more of those than cargo here. But we do have some decent cargo ships, plenty enough to get all of these things out to Nomaya that we want to. Uh, David says, what speed differential do you aim for with the mixture of ships? I try to get to everything else being equal. If all you were doing was selecting speed, I would try to get every ship the same speed because the task force will move at the speed of the slowest ship. And so if you have a bunch of 18s, President Monroe, uh, anyway, I'll get to you in a minute, Stanley. You try to get, so your task force moves at the speed of the slowest ship. So if you have a bunch of 18s and then a 12 in the task force, it will move at 12. And so you're slowing everybody else down. So all other things being equal, you would definitely like to have them at the same speed, so you're being the most efficient, right? Keep the 16s with the 16s and the 12s with the 12s. Now that's not always going to be the case, especially in a transport task force like this, because the cargo is generally going to move a little slower than the transports. And it kind of comes down to this question. If you have a transport, so up here on the screen, I've got the Matsonia and the Monterey. They move at a 22 speed, 22 knots. Now, ideally, you would love for them to go by themselves and take some troops out there. So if we find some units that need to be moved and they're troop only, really, load them on there, put them with a destroyer, which is also very fast and gives you ASW, and send them where they need to go. But in the case where you have anti-aircraft or you have artillery, where you have a mix of some troop but mainly cargo, then you're going to want cargo ships in there. And we can look for some faster cargo. There's one here that's 17, but ultimately, if it's in here with these guys, that whole task force is going 17. They're going to stick together. And so that, again, is kind of yin and yang. It's efficiency over speed. Sometimes you're going to want to pick one or pick the other. So it just in some ways depends, but all other things being equal, you would rather they all be the same speed. Stanley asked if President Monroe has been surpassed as the worst president. Monroe is not down at the bottom of those lists, Stanley. He had the Monroe Doctrine, right, where he told all Europe, don't mess with the Americas. I don't know how true that's been. But yes, Monroe was the 5th president, I believe. I don't know. I'm just spitting out historical facts here. I believe he was the 5th president, and the Monroe Doctrine. But I don't think he's considered particularly one of the worst. That's usually reserved for Buchanan. I'm only talking about presidents pre-1900. Let's start there. Let's not get into current events. Right. Bayard says the speed listed there is max speed, not cruise speed. Absolutely. Good point, Bayard. Back to LA. Isn't that where we were? Okay, so we've got this unit, 78th Field AA Battalion. We want to get them out to Nomaya. Their objective to be Nomaya. We've already set that, okay? They're already set to strategic, but we do need to buy them out. And this is where we were. We're talking about, buying things out here. This just costs 31 points to change. Okay, it's not even, and that's because it's already at the high command level. If it was down here, I'm making this up, but let's just say it was at the 9th U.S. Corps and you wanted it to be part of the 3 U.S. Corps, then we would have 2 different point values here. But as it is, it's already at the high command level as its commander or command unit. And it says, let's go to South Pacific U.S. or South Pacific U.S. What in the world? South Pacific HQ. I don't know why I said that. South Pacific HQ is here. That's going to be 27, but actually it's costing us 31 now. That was my fault. We should have done that earlier. I think it would have only cost us 27. This unit has built up a little bit as the turns have gone by, and so it's costing us actually 4 more points. Now all you ever have to do is make sure that's green and hit done, and it's done. And now it's South Pacific, strategic move. This is another one that is, bound for Nomaya. We'll be on that Nomaya task force, so I'm going to leave that white for now. Then we have LA Harbor Defenses, LA Base Force. Let's turn those red. Those are obviously not going anywhere. We have the ACM Chimo, which is part of the Chimo class of ACMs. That is maintaining our minefield. We'll just turn that orange. It's not going to go anywhere. It could, if we needed it for some reason somewhere else, but we will always want a mine tender here at Los Angeles. Then we get down to the Platte. So now we're starting to get into the ships. and we're going to want to set up task forces. But I have already done this. I have just not marked it on my spreadsheet. So we did Tanker Task Force 1. We docked it, we loaded it with fuel, and we're going to Pearl Harbor. And we told it, do not refuel. So it is out here, and the easiest way, I think, to find this is to look for the AO plat. And I've got these already sorted, but they don't really sort by alphabetical order by type. They kind of sort by importance in some respects. Although you would say an AO is probably more important than one lone destroyer, um, it's still a fuel cargo hauler, so it puts it behind all of these things. We will get to the AOs eventually before any of us get a headache, I hope. Oh, we're on AO. Okay, the AO plat. Where the heck is this? There it is. Task Force 241. Let's see where this is. All right. It is out here. It is heading for Pearl Harbor. Great. Now again, it's not moving very fast. It's cruising along here, not moving fast. But I really want to get this sub activity out of here. And hopefully, when we put these destroyers out here this turn, it's going to start to scare away or sink some of this Japanese sub activity. So that is doing what it's supposed to be doing. What else is in here? Oh, this is a really nice, wow, look at this. Look at this capacity. 81,000 tons of fuel coming out this way. We do have the DD Kilty, which it's showing as red, but that's just because the home port is at LA. Now this is actually interesting because we have a do not refuel order on here because obviously the AO and these tankers do not need to refuel at Pearl Harbor. I mean, they've got plenty of endurance to get there and get back. The Kilty does need to. That's just something we need to remember. When we get down to the Kilty here, this needs to be peeled off and replenished here. So it's just something we'll need to do. But otherwise, we've got the Tanker Task Force going where it's going. I almost would like to make this a continuous supply, but my experience tells me we're going to need these going other places. Some of these will need to go to Australia eventually. The AO, as Bayard rightly pointed out, we really want to protect. So, we're going to try to keep that as safe as possible. Maybe just have it make runs, local runs up and down the West Coast or do something like that. Maybe even out to Alaska for a moment. But, we'll be looking at this. I'm going to keep this Tanker Task Force 1 green because we will need to look at it as it pulls into Pearl Harbor and otherwise. Now, Cole has us with the AO Tippecanoe out back at LA, doing nothing with it. Now, I generally don't like that. I don't like things sitting around. And let's go find it. And there is the Tippecanoe, sure enough. It's got a capacity of 9820, an endurance of 9600, and 11 speed. Now, we do need to get some of these, well, we don't have any destroyers here. We do have the destroyer, the aircraft tender that's a destroyer, but it's only got a 2 ASW. That's not good enough for me. What I'm going to do is these 2 AOs, I'm going to let them sit here for now. Why is that? Well, and avert your eyes if you don't want to see what happened last turn. But if we go back down to, or go over to ship availability, and we look at our ETA here, yeah, there we go. Let's get back up here. We have got all of these destroyers coming in at Balboa down at the Panama Canal in 3 days. These destroyers have a 4 ASW because they do have radar. Still early radar, so it's only a 4 ASW, but they do have radar, and all of these are kind of the same. 140 anti-aircraft, 4 radar, good ships, much better than the stock destroyers we have right now. When these get on the board, I know that Cole has us take them up to San Diego, or at least some of them. We're going to go up to San Diego and get a big tanker AO task force. Then we're going to take it out to Pearl Harbor and let them run ASW for those guys because I want those destroyers out of Pearl Harbor. We're going to replace the destroyers we currently have with our carriers with these destroyers. So then we're going to, once that AO and those other tankers are out there, we're going to, replace the destroyers that are in the carrier task forces with the better destroyers, and then take the destroyers that are only twos but can still run some DD for you and match those up with tankers, match those up with AOs, and also get them doing more anti-sub out by Pearl Harbor. So that's generally how, or send them back to the States. I generally, one thing while we're talking about that is, so we're going to be getting those better destroyers. They'll come up here first. Then they'll go with, tankers and AOs out to Pearl Harbor. They'll get with the carriers. The ones that the carriers no longer need will either run ASW out there, or they'll come back and forth with tankers and AOs, or I'll set them up here, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Vancouver. And we'll just be running a bunch of ASW with those level 2, the 2 ASW destroyers. Okay, so we're gonna, I guess that was a long way of saying we're gonna leave the Tippecanoe here for now. I will turn that green. The AP Barnett, it's Cola said, carry troops to Nomaya. I think the Barnett is in here. Yep, we've got it in our transport Nomaya. So we're going to leave that white because we're going to come back to that. Then we have a Cargo Task Force 2 out to Pearl Harbor. I do know that this is on its way. The PC Travis is out there with it. And then we have a bunch of ships that are in Tanker Task Force 1. So all of those TKs, the tankers that we saw already in that task force, those were the next things we were supposed to set up. I've got those all green. We just looked at those. We know where they're going. Now Cole says the AK Aguamonte, which is a cargo ship, is waiting to carry troops to Nomaya, and you see it here, the Aguamonte, and so we are leaving that green. All right, then we have the AKR, the Arkansas. So the state of Arkansas, Arkansas. Okay, sure. Right now, or originally, Cole said no action on these, but the plan was to join the transport task force going San Francisco to LA that's taking the 31st PG, so the P-39s, to Sydney. Now, we sent those, well, that's a good question. Are those on their way? I believe they are, and we sent those south, so this really should be them. Let's see if I'm right. It is them, the 31st PG 39th. Now, the Arkansas was supposed to go with these, but it is not with them, and that is what we call user error. Yeah, it's not out there. Oh yeah, David asks, is one destroyer enough for a tanker? No, but we really didn't have a lot of options when that one took off. But Bayard makes a good point, or maybe that was, yeah, Bayard makes a good point. As that comes into Pearl, you can send destroyers out there, and that's something we'll be looking at when we go and look at Pearl Harbor, that some of these task forces coming to Pearl Harbor, we're going to be taking all of these destroyers that we have here that are just free agents right now. They don't really have a mission, and we're going to have them go merge with some of these just to make sure. You see our carriers outpaced everything, but we've got a bunch of stuff right out here. This probably is safe. Gosh, I don't want to say that, right? Because when we resolve this turn, of course the game's going to prove me wrong. Out here, they're still probably okay. A lot of the Japanese sub-activity early on is going to be right around the islands themselves, but we are going to send some of these destroyers back out here to merge and form up with those task forces. So the Arkansas, we're just going to have to go look for it and figure out what in the world did I do with the Arkansas. Let's get down to the AKs. Oh, good, it did put these in alphabetical order. It's all the way up here at the A's. Let's find it. Hmm. Where is this thing? Oh, maybe it's a little farther. There's more. Now, it looked like it put them in alphabetical order, but it does appear there are quite a few more. Look at all the AKs we have here. This is needle in a haystack stuff. Um, I wish I could just search by name, really. Oh, I guess I could sort by name, couldn't I? Okay, let's do that. Um, hmm, where is this dang thing? J K. I'm having to there it is. I'm having to like go through the alphabet. Okay, it's still at LA. Well, gosh, I guess I could have figured that out. Um, it's still here at LA. It did not go with those P-39s as we were supposed to do. I think it's a little late now. That task force is headed off to Sydney. What's its speed? It's a 12. How fast is this I don't know that it would ever catch it. I guess this maybe is stopping a few times, but it's 12s. It is stopping along the way, but I don't want to send that cargo ship out there just by itself to go try to merge with that. So we'll figure something else out to do with that. It's fine. I'm just going to make a note. Um, Another mission. Okay, let's make that note. Not sure why I didn't put that one in there. Sometimes you're setting these up and you just miss a ship. Um, then we had the Diamond Head and the Dorothy Lockenbach. They're in that cargo too. The Cargo Task Force 2 out to Pearl. Uh, then I also had the Inslee City. All right, so we're going to leave that Cargo Task Force 2 as green. Okay, and let's see. Then we have the Inslee City that should also be with this task force. If I forgot this one, I may get fired. There it is. Thank goodness I got the Inslee City in there. Um, you know, that's green. We could almost turn these orange. When they arrive in Sydney, we're surely going to know it because we'll be very happy to get those P-39s to Nomaya. I guess they're ultimately going to Nomaya out that way. Okay. Now we've got the Henry S. Grove and the K.I. Luckenbach in LA that are supposed to be part of this task force that is carrying troops to Nomaya. We got the J.L. Luckenbach in there. All right, fantastic. And the Henry S. Grove. Okay, great. So we're going to leave those white because we're still building that task force, trying to figure out exactly what needs to go in there. The Liberty, we are going to keep green. It's in that Cargo Task Force 2, which is a massive task force that's moving it's probably right along the tankers. I think they all go at about 12, so it's probably moving along with those. The Ohioan is supposed to be in this P-39 task force. Let's see if we did it. We did it. All right, great. As is the Tuscaloosa City, which is also out here. Fantastic. Now, a big reason we put these cargo ships in here, these extra ones, we didn't need them for the planes. The planes fit on 3. Okay, great. So you're probably like, okay, awesome. You know, we'll take that. What we're doing here is also making this a supply run. Look at, you know, this is all supply, all 3,200, right? This 3,200, it costs like, you know, what is this, 276 of the cargo space to get the planes on here, and then we have a lot of supply here. So all in all, I mean, we're running about 18,000 in supply that's eventually going to make its way to Nomaya. Now, you know, that's okay. I just had a thought there, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. Let's go green on those two, the Tuscaloosa City and the Ohioan. And with that, I think our hour is up. And I've got to get back to my job, my real job. And so I would love to keep going here. What I think I'll do is maybe come back at 3 o'clock today, 3 o'clock Pacific. Now, I know for you guys in Europe, that does not do you. Bayard has a good question, and I will get to that. Bayard talking about splitting up those squadrons. Yes, we will get into that because I think you make a good point. Anyway, so I think I'm going to come back at 3 o'clock Pacific, 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific, potentially, and stream. I'm also probably going to be talking about Distant Worlds 2. I'm going to put up a little video about that. Slytherin did a preview of Distant Worlds 2 today. Holy smokes, when I say I'm excited about that game, that looks like the ultimate space 4X game that's ever been made. I mean, arguably Distant Worlds universe already is, I think, anyway. And I do like Stellaris. It's come a long ways, let's put it that way. Galactic Civilizations, um, it's fine. It's very pretty, Galactic Civilizations 2 and 3. I thought 2 was better than 3. But Distant Worlds universe, whew, man, is that game something. But now 2 is going to be coming out. So anyway, and I'm also making a basic tutorial right now for Fields of Glory or Field of Glory 2, because Field of Glory 2 Medieval will be coming out shortly, February 4th. And so anyway, I should be putting up the first episode of that today. It's only going to be like 3 or 4 episodes, I think. Not nearly as in depth as Gary Grigsby, of course. So anyway, as always, thank you so much for joining me for this setup. I much prefer talking to you guys while I set all this stuff up, so it's a lot of fun for me. Hopefully you find it informative and you like talking over these things, and hopefully it's educational as well as about how the game works, and we hit new things every time. So as always, thank you so much. Strategy Gaming Dojo